What is up, guys, and welcome to part 2 of my 3-part series on how I coach cubers using Max as a case study. So, this video we're going to be analysing, or rather going through the reconstructions of Max Park's 6.21 first round average at a Bruin Cube Day 2018, and I'll just be going through the reconstructions in this video, but for my coaching purposes, when I do this for a client, I do have them send in a video of them solving and do refer to it. However, I've done this ahead of time, so I'm not going to bother showing the video, plus it's kind of crappy to do that since it's Max's video and not mine. Another reason I'm not including a video, although it could be a good idea, but for Max Park specifically, I don't think showing the video is beneficial because there's not really much to point out in terms of like his finger tricks that he's doing. Rather, it's his solutions that are important because the way he turns and his look ahead and his TPS, like you watch him solve and you can very clearly see like he's hasn't got a whole lot of room to improve there. Like I think he could do more different finger tricks, but due to his fine motor skill condition, it's pretty hard for me to recommend what turning would be best because it really depends on his individual capabilities, and I have reason to believe that he may not be able to handle some advanced finger tricks. But regardless, having a video sent to me is important for this kind of analysis work, even though it doesn't have to be like perfectly up to date, as I mentioned in the previous video for context. But yeah, when I do this analysis service for other people, I pretty much insist that they send me an average of 5 for that event. For other events, I'll have like a different arrangement where I have them send me like slow walkthrough solves or something. That's more useful for like the bigger cubes. But I make sure that the angle is good so that it's basically like my cubing videos, like over one shoulder. Point of view of the GoPro is also good. One of those two makes it really easy for me to track everything. Other than that, as long as the lighting's good, the quality of the video really doesn't have to be that much higher than like 360, honestly. But obviously just, you know, the higher the quality, the better. And other than that, I also do insist that cubers include the scrambles because I'm not going to reconstruct from scratch. That's just obnoxious, too much work to get a scramble. And on top of that, if someone does send me an average and they happen to miss scramble on 1 or 2 solves, I can still usually give them a good improvement plan. It just means I'll have less of these tidbits that I'm going to go over soon. But if they have like more miss scrambles than that, I'll just be like, yo, can you send me a new video because the scrambles aren't working? Or just have them agree that they won't get the tidbits, but just based on my visual, I'll tell them what they probably need to improve on. So that's more or less what to expect in terms of, you know, how I will work with you should you choose to take me up on this service. But for Max Park, because the solves were reconstructed by maybe Breast, maybe not, we already have the solution, so the fact that his video was like from the spectator point of view doesn't really matter. But that's pretty much all the preamble aside. Now we're going to get into the actual solves. Alright, here we have solve number 1 of the average, and this was a 6.39 second solve, which is pretty close to the average ended up getting, which was 6.2. So the solution was pretty typical, but we're going to get started regardless. So the cross he did was yellow, noting that this piece is solved. These two are in a relatively good position because you can put them in one after the other and then they're in correct relation, just needing a D prime to adjust them. And then this edge is just hanging up here. I believe the first pair he tracked had to... I don't know if he tracked a pair here or not, but it doesn't really matter because it ends up working out pretty well. So what he did, so he started with D, F, R, and then he has this cross edge left here, and he finishes by doing a fat D, like that, and then he inserts like this, and then this might be the pair he tracked. He probably noticed that if he did maybe like D and then insert there, it wouldn't have paired up. So he does that, and then he does an E to finish, which is actually pretty efficient because E cancels out the U prime U he would have done. So very rare to see that in crosses, but in my opinion it was the most efficient option, so that just kind of goes to show how advanced Max is in terms of like the intuitive side of his solve. I think he is pretty advanced. Going back to the cross, the only thing I really took any issue with at all was after the first 3 moves. So he did a fat D, wide R, U prime, wide R prime, and then an E slice to finish the cross. Technically you can just do it in 3 moves by doing this, L prime, fat U prime, L, However, this obviously doesn't set the first pair up nearly as well as he did. Other than that, what else did I have written here? Okay, yeah, so with the fat L prime, so you see this pair here. We'll just undo those last couple moves. So what was it? FR, R prime, F prime. So at this point in the solution, it is very easy to track this first pair. In my opinion, this first pair is easier to track than the one Max chose. So you could do FR, L prime, and then fat U prime, and then just some sort of U to get the pair out of the way, or just go ahead and insert it right away and then finish later, which then actually cancels into this. But that's... no one's going to inspect up into that point, although it is kind of easy to... I guess... what's the word I'm looking for? It's easy to see that coming and then cancel into it, just like on the fly. So that's like the only thing I have to note about his cross. But still, the pair he chose like did end up working out pretty well, and it's not that hard to track. It's just this edge moving to there and then realizing that it's a case where it'll pair up. So, oh, we did that. Like that. So I don't have that much of an issue with that. Moving on to his first pair, he just inserts it like normal, like so, which I think is fine. Technically, he could have done a sledge to set this up to a 3-mover, but that's adding an extra 2 moves and you're unorienting 2 edges, so that's like a very, very minor detail, and I take no issue with Max doing the solution he chose. And multi-slotting cases like that in general aren't as useful as people think, although they are very, very cool. There's only like a handful of cases people have found that are like really, really worthwhile. So I'm not going to really scold him for that. So that's fine, he does that, and then he immediately sees this, and he solves it like so. And when you think about that solution, what he just did, so I may have, well, I don't think I would have done this, but someone may have done U prime, sledge, and then 1, 2, 3. So that ends up being 9 moves. What he does is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 1 extra move, and it makes it RUL instead of RULF. So that's kind of a good demonstration of why that multi-slotting stuff is a bit overhyped. Like, when you really run the numbers, it's not actually that much better. Now we'll move on to something Max did that I wasn't really a big fan of. So he did a Y rotation, and then he had this pair, which he solved with that solution. Pretty typical, you can do that. You could do the triple sexy way. I believe Max does both, which we'll find out later in the average. But I think it's pretty obvious why I take issue with that. Come on, dude. And the reason I want to point that out in particular is because once you've done your first few pairs on 3x3, because there's just naturally less places to find F12 pieces, you should be picking the right pair like every time once you're on the last 2 pairs. Granted, this was kind of a tricky case because the diagonal slots means it's the hardest one to see everything, but even still in these kinds of cases you should be picking the correct pair like 10 times out of 10. And especially when it's right in front of you like this, like I mean, I guess he might have been looking ahead for, let's just undo this. He might have just seen this corner and kind of, like, predicted that this edge might have been solved, so he did this and then had, like, a prediction confirmation moment where he just saw that. And by tunnel visioning in that way, he just didn't see the pair. But, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of what he did here, so... But we'll do it anyway, and then once we get to this point, there's another thing he did that I'm not a big fan of. There's this big block here, but, like, let's just ignore it. Like, there is some stuff you can do that I've looked at, but like I don't blame nor expect Max to look for that kind of stuff. It's a lot of the time you just kind of shoot yourself in the foot for trying to be cool. So what Max did to solve this pair was a Y, and then he did like that, and then fat D prime, and then insert. Not terrible per se, however, so we'll rotate here and do the same thing. What I would have done is I would have just done the lefty insert like so. And although it does give a slightly worse LL case, there's no way Max was banking on that whatsoever, so in my opinion he should learn how to solve this pair from the back like so, probably with a finger trick like that, knowing his turning. The only other thing I could think of mentioning is he could do a Y2 and then do ZBLS, which is very easy to like trigger, because it's just sledge. However, that does involve a Y2, and also because Max doesn't use very much ZBLL, if any at all, getting all edges on top really doesn't mean that much to him. So I'm not going to be too much of a stickler for him missing even like the easiest ZBLS cases, because for someone like Max who doesn't know a whole lot of ZB, it's not going to help that much. But if hypothetically he did know a fair bit more ZB, then doing that kind of insert becomes more worthwhile. And the other reason it's not that big of a deal is because he still gets 2 edges on top, and a lot of those, if not all of those OLLs are pretty good. So you're really just trading one OLL for another, and the only difference is how nice the F12 case is. And this, I mean, it's fast, but it's not as good as that. And what Max ended up doing was maybe a little bit better, because you could flow into the rotations while solving the pair efficiently, as opposed to doing the rotation immediately and just spamming for your life. Nothing to talk about last layer. He did this, you know, anti-zoom, and then you got J-perm. I have no issue whatsoever with him doing either of those. So that was solve 1, now we're going to move on to solve 2. Alright, we are now up to what I believe is solve 2. At the very least it'll be solve 2 of 4, because like I mentioned in the part 1 video, I'm not actually analysing all 5 solves because one of the solves wasn't filmed. But of course I did this intentionally because I wanted to demonstrate that low sample sizes can still give you a very good improvement plan while only giving you some less tidbits, which again is not really where the nuggets of wisdom lie. But regardless, solve 2, this is a 5.08 solve, which is pretty damn good, I have to admit. And the cross he chose here was blue, and I have a lot to say about this because what he did was brilliantly simple, and I really, really mean it, because when you see something like this, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh my god, all these blocks, I must preserve everything and try to make a double, triple, quadruple X-cross or some crap like that. Or just like an X-cross while also like preserving this pair. This is definitely like overwhelming X-cross city right here. Max did not get overwhelmed by this. He did something very simple, and once again, when you run the numbers, it was better than my, I guess, hindbrain X-cross reaction to this scramble. That's probably the best way to put it. So first I'm just going to go through what I would have done and basically explain why it ain't all that great. So what I see this edge here, this one's opposite, so I just do F2 to line those up. And with these edges here, it's very easy to like swing them with the F2, because this isn't in the right spot in relation, but it can be very easily, likewise with this edge. And then this edge here for an X-cross is very well lined up, and this pair can be preserved really easily. So this is what my hindbrain reaction would have done. I'd be like, okay, we need to get this edge to go to here, but I want to solve this block with L F2 R prime. So if I have this edge here, then L F2 R prime puts that there, and nicely, it preserves this pair. So I would do something like that, and then we have this little situation that isn't too bad to deal with, and I would finish it by taking this pair out and just putting it in like so. So just so we're clear, so far we have done 4 moves. So R2, L, F2, R prime, so that's 4 moves, and then to finish the double X cross we do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Which is a 10 move double X cross, that's good, but when we look at what Max did, he did the very, very simple, easy to finger trick option, which was just doing the cross directly and noticing this pair and then this second pair, which, I mean, he had to have looked ahead to. So he just did L, F2, R prime L, and then I think he did fat U, and then, so just so we're clear, this is 5 moves so far, that was a 5 move cross, and then he did L prime UL, 6, 7, 8, and keyhole this edge, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and he did a fat U, which again was really brilliant because it put the double X cross on left, meaning last 2 pairs are very much in sight. So he only did an extra, like, 3 moves, I think. 3 moves. And think how, like, fast 3 moves go by in a solve. So looking at the X-cross I did, which was, like, god-awful in terms of finger tricks and flow, and then you look at what Max did, which was a similar enough move count to not really matter, while also being significantly easier to finger trick, and on top of that he gets the pairs where he wants them, more or less. Having the 2x2x3 either here or here for having 2 pairs solved like this is always going to be the best case scenario. So that's why I say his solution was brilliantly simple, because it was literally brilliantly simple. Like, you couldn't ask for much better than that. And then, yeah, the way he did the second pair, because if he just did a D, then he has the worst case, which is both in front, which is definitely better than both on right, because with both on right, you at least have a pair visible here. So he turned the quote-unquote worst case into one of the two arguably best cases. And then last two pairs, they're two-genable, and that's what he does. So pairs like this, U2 insert, and then here he does through rough, and then he does G-perm. I will point out one thing. This is just some really, really random crap I've noticed, and this is not something I expect people to learn and implement on a large scale, but through experience, I've noticed when I have the block here and the block here for this OLLCP, if I do the alg from there, I can get T-perm, whereas if I get it from here, I'll get the RUD G-perm, which is what Max got. And that's how we got a 5.08. But knowing that kind of stuff isn't really that useful. If anything, I think it's better to predict the G-perm by just knowing that case and being like, oh, I just go straight into RUR prime, which is probably what I do most of the time. I don't think T-perm is that much better given the kind of crappier OLL and added AUFs. But yeah, that's what Max did. And yeah, like, I had no complaints about anything he did in that solve whatsoever. Just some very, very interesting notes. So this is one of those solves where my analysis wouldn't really so much help Max as it would help the people watching this case study. But as we get into the last two solves, we will point out a few less than ideal things Max is doing. So on to solve 3. Okay, this is solve 3. This was a 6.53 solve, and the color Max chose here was green. This is a slightly less intense version of the last solve where you see some blocks and think X cross potential, but because of this here, it just makes it really, really complicated. And the edge, it's in like an okay place. Like you could do R prime F DUR L2 and then insert that. But again, I'm not going to bother running the numbers for this one. You can figure out those moves on your own. But when you run the numbers, what Max did is, you know, fine. So the first pair he tracked was related to the block. He saw this corner was going to come up here, and then move to there, and this would be a really nice pair here. So the way he solved the cross is he just put these two opposite, like so, put it with the opposite center, such as this edge here that was already there, and then this pair comes up here, and then he finishes with D, F prime, D, U prime. So again, another efficient use of finger tricks by Max. So he sees this pair, and then this is going to be his second pair here, like so. He could have cancelled into this pair like that, but what he did was fine. So he did U prime, make the pair, and then insert, which is similar move count. He could have also done this, and then had a free pair like that, but it's hard to switch between those two because it's not really clear when one is more worth it than the other, and yeah, it doesn't really matter that much. I'm just pointing that out for... This is something I would point out in the actual critique for Max, because I think it is good for people to be aware of alternate solutions like these, just in case, for whatever reason, they're not aware of them, but if they are, then, you know, good for them. But anyways, insert like that. And then we have these kind of annoying last two pairs here. So I probably would have just seen this and inserted that, which is nice since it flips two edges, but what Max did was almost ideal. There is one little thing I didn't like about it. So with this pair here, he did pair up like that, and then U prime like that, which I think is kind of awkward to execute. And what you can do instead with thumbs on front, if you do the pair like that first, and then do the L immediately, you can take advantage of your right hand doing the U moves. I would obviously do it with the U2, but Max, since he doesn't double flick, he would execute it something like that. And then if you're really ballsy, what you could do is you could do RU prime M prime B2. Like that. But that's, again, that's a reach. And if I started implementing that into my solves, I don't know if I would be seeing the benefit for at least like 3 months, just because of how risky it is. But I thought I'd throw that in there for fun. Another thing you can do is you can just do F prime and then insert like that. That's kind of awkward. I think it's better if you get it from this angle and you like recognize it ahead of time like that. But yeah, so Max did this. The other reason I didn't really like ending the pair like that is because LU to L prime sets up, in my opinion, a slightly nicer pair. But I mean, this ends up being fine. And then he does this pair just standardly like that. And then here's the other thing I noticed that I didn't really like. So the way he does this OLL is he does a backsoon like that and then a U into through rough. In my opinion, it's better to just AUF like this, do the backsoon, and then immediately have the through rough in front of you. Other algorithms I would maybe suggest Max choose instead of that is double sledge, double sexy. With his turning style, that might be really good. Another one is, it's the start of another OLL where it's like this, and then you go into free rough like that. But, oh, actually I undid it, wow. But yeah, I think this is one of the like few OLLs Max may need to clean up. In general, I trust his OLL and PLL game to be like on point such that it suits his turning capabilities, but there are probably like a couple cases that I could nitpick and recommend something better. That being said, I don't think him cleaning up all of his OLL and PLLs to being like close to optimal would really give him that much of a time advantage, but it's just something to consider and something I would throw in there. But anyway, so he does it like that, does the free rough, and then he gets his L perm, which he does it correctly, as far as I'm concerned. So that was solve 3. We're now going to move on to solve 5, because I've now confirmed that the missing solve in the video was a 6.3, which was solve 4. But instead we'll be looking at his 5.95 to finish the 621 average. Alright, here we are, 4th solve of the video and 5th solve of the average, 5.95. So for this solve, Max did an X-cross on white, which I'm mostly okay with. However, this is one of those cases where I'll point out an alternative solution, just in case the client in question, in this case Max, is not aware of it, because he may find it a useful trick that will apply to other cross solutions in the future. So, X-cross, we got this edge here, this pair that lines up with it real nice, and then the edge that goes with it can be solved in L2, which, conveniently enough, can solve another cross edge, assuming we set it up correctly, obviously. So, we make the pair, D, R prime, that's what he did, and then to finish he did D, and he did L2, and then R prime FR like that. Which, again, it's not that bad. If he was planning for that next pair to be right there, then it might have been better. What I would suggest doing instead is doing LU2 LF prime to finish like that. And the reason I think that's a little better is because it makes the finish LUF gen with the D finisher, as opposed to an LRF gen with a D finisher at the bottom. So it's really just one D move, but for the most part, it's LUF versus LRF. I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other, but if that's something Max wasn't aware of, then that's an optimization that he could definitely apply to a bunch of other cross solutions, and that's pretty much why I throw that kind of stuff in there. So, but regardless, so what he did, L2, R prime FR, D, like that, and then second pair, these two, and then third pair, so I was wrong earlier, I thought he did this with triple sexy. I now remember he does just solve this case with the inverse sexy, which is actually what I do, so it's nice to know that me and Max are on some similar wavelength there. My only critique with this is at this point you can very clearly see there's no oriented edges for the last layer, or not enough to be comfortable with what's to come, so I would have preferred to see him do something like this. Even though, again, like I said, for someone like Max, getting your edges all oriented isn't that big of a deal because he is mostly a pure CFOP solver. And the .OLLs, I think people really overhype how bad they are. I think most of them are similar speed to like every other OLL. However, I can't deny that a couple of them are a bit worse. And it is also relatively easy to avoid. So the previous EO thing, I didn't mind too much because again, Max doesn't know ZB, but for something like this, I would probably recommend he do a sledge here. The other reason I would recommend him to do a sledge is because with this last F12 pair, you can very, very clearly see he's trying to avoid EO, and this is without a doubt the most low-level thing Max did in this average, to put it nicely. So the way he finishes this pair to get some edges is he does a fat DU, and then he reduces this pair to a different pair that's equally annoying, and then he does this to split it up, and then he gets two of his edges like that, which is a very, very long and convoluted way to get there. I'm not going to be able to retrace all of that, so I'm just going to do this on my backup cube. Okay, so with this last pair, I would recommend a few things for EO options. Firstly, just pair the pair up lefty and then do a lefty sledge. I don't think lefty sledge is something beyond Max's turning capabilities. I think he could absolutely implement that. The other thing which he may or may not be able to implement, or may or may not want to implement, is a full EO trick where you bring this corner over the slot like that, and then you M-slice the edge in, and then get all your edges like so. And again, because Max doesn't know ZBLL, getting all of your edges isn't the biggest deal in the world. That being said, going from a dot to all edges is pretty sweet, and given just the nature of the solution, because it's like RUF basically with some M slices, that may be nicer for Max than doing an LUF gen alg. I'm not sure what Max would prefer, LUF gen that doesn't get all edges but still avoids dot, or RUF M gen and it gives you all edges. So it's hard to say which Max would prefer using. Wait, what am I doing? Hang on. How do I retrace this? Oh my god, I suck. There we go. Okay. But anyways, we'll continue with what Max did. But yeah, I would definitely recommend he switch to one of those two. So then he finishes like that. And once again, no problems with the last layer. Just F double sexy F prime, G perm, no AOF. And that was a 5.95, which finished off his 6.2 on average. So that's going through all the solves, and that's going through all the little tidbits of information. Now for the next part of this video series, oh god, I can't think. So for the next video, part 3, that'll be coming out soon, we'll be going through the improvement plan that I'll give Max based on the notes I took from these 4 solves, which will hopefully, if not definitely, demonstrate that you do not need a very large sample size to give someone a well thought out improvement plan, especially if you're aware enough of how they solve beyond the... It's not so much about like analyzing every solve you're sent, it's just about like the context of the cube. Like there are certain things I know about Max that didn't necessarily show up in this average, but just because I know these things, they do kind of come up in the improvement plan. But that's separate from having a larger sample size of solves to analyze, because I wouldn't really call that like extra information, I would just call that context. But anyways, this is getting way too rambly. Alright, that's the video. Stay tuned for part 3. Thanks for watching.